Pokemon Wetlands drawing with Ms. Boley. So we are going to be creating our own Wetlands Pokemon, and we're going to be making a drawing of it in our visual journal. Why are we doing this? Well, for art, we're learning how to look at, analyze, and represent natural forms. So for example, wetlands animals. We're going to learn how to add detail and texture to enhance our artwork. And we're going to learn how we can draw complex forms by breaking them down into simple shapes. So some words we need to know. We need to know realism. So realism is like the picture you see here. It's artwork that's trying to show exact detail and look almost exactly the same as real life. So kind of like a photograph. And then on the other side, we have abstraction. So that's artwork that is based on real life. So we see this as a picture of a woman, but it simplifies details and it doesn't look exactly the same as real life. So our goal with this assignment, we're not looking for realism, like far left picture here. We're aiming for about this middle one here. We want to have enough detail that we can tell what the adaptations of the different animals are, but we're still having kind of a cartoony style, like what we see in the Pokemon cartoon, right? So that's our aim there, is that middle one. What are we going to need? We're going to be needing our visual journal or a sheet of paper, a pencil and an eraser. We're going to need some type of colors, so it could be pencil, crayons, markers, or both, and a Sharpie marker or other type of pen or marker for outlining. It doesn't need to be a Sharpie, it could just be a pen or marker. So as I mentioned before, we are going to make a drawing of a pretend animal, sort of like a Pokemon, that combines adaptations from several wetlands animals. Look at my picture here. What wetlands animals do you think that are combined here? Then we're going to be labeling our animals' adaptations, describing what the adaptations are for, and giving it a name, because all Pokemon have to have a name, right? And then we'll be drawing a background for our animals as well, or our Pokemon as well, so that we can tell where they live. They will all live in the wetlands, but you might have them living in a tree, you might have them living in the water, you might have them living on land. You have to show that in your background image. And here is my Pokemon with labels. So I've used Google Slides to add in my labels. So we won't go through all of those, but you can pause the video if you want to read them. And I gave him a name, so it's Harabi. So the name combines heron, froggy, and beaver, because those are kind of the main animals which I combined. Okay, so I've provided you some Google Slides which have common wetlands animals and explains the different adaptations that they have and what they are for. So you're going to use those Google Slides to do some research and decide on 3 to 5 adaptations that you're going to have your Pokemon have, that your Pokemon's going to have. Then, once you've done that research, you're going to complete this planning table. So you can just copy this table down into your notebook, or you can fill it out in the Google Slides. So fill this out, choose the adaptations that your Pokemon will have. So for example, my Pokemon, Harabi, had a long bill, just like a heron. Okay, so the adaptation would be long bill, the animal is a heron, and the purpose is to be able to catch fish in the water. So step 1, we're going to sketch out in pencil using simple shapes and reference images. So you can use the Google Slides for with the adaptations for reference images, or you can use Google Images to find reference images just to see what they look like. So for example, if I want to draw froggy legs, I need to know what those look like. So I might look up a picture of a frog or use that one that I see right there in the corner. Let's get started on step 1. So for this part, I'm just using a pencil, eraser, and I grabbed a pencil sharpener as well. So I'm going to draw my Pokemon on this side of my visual journal page. I'm going to have my labels on this side. My visual journal is smaller than the size that you most likely have. So I'm going to probably need a bit more space, but for you, you can maybe have your labels and your Pokemon on one page. So I'm going to start out by drawing a simple shape. So I want to do an oval shape because I'm imagining that its body is sort of like an oval shape, kind of like the Pokemon Bidoof, which is a beaver, kind of based on a beaver. So I've drawn my oval shape, and then my frog, I'm going to have frog legs so that the animal can jump on land and swim in water. So I'm going to draw a simplified version of those. So sort of just like a long skinny oval over to the side. And I'm using light pressure with my pencil. I don't know, you might not be able to exactly see every line I'm drawing because I just want to place things where they're supposed to go right now. Like I'm just sketching in. I'm not committing to anything. So I could erase this if I decided, oh, I don't really like that. So I did the long hair and beak and the eyes, which are kind of like round, googly eyes, sort of, and then the beaver tail, which is going to help the animal to steer and swim. And I loved that clear eyelids adaptation, so I'm going to have my animal have that, my Pokemon will have that. And great, now I think I'm done the sketching in part. I like it. I'm not going to erase or move anything. I'm just going to erase some of the overlapping lines, just to help me when I go in with a darker pressure pencil. All right, so I'm ready for darker pressure. So I'm gonna go and outline with my pencil and just provide a bit more detail. So my original drawing was just simple shapes. And so now I'm adding some simple detail. So I wanted the fur to be like that thick, oily beaver fur. And again, I'm really inspired by the Pokemon Bidoof. So I'm kind of doing sort of a bumpy line for the fur. And I realized I forgot to draw arms, front arms. So I'm gonna go draw those in. And those are gonna have claws, just sort of similar to a beaver. So I'm gonna go and outline, adding more detail as I go. So I might add the spots on the frog's legs. I might add fur texture. I might add the texture of the beaver tail. So let's speed up the video and do that. All right, so now I'm also adding in the background. And my animal is an amphibian, so it's going to live both on land and in the water, but mostly in the water. So I'm going to draw it sitting sort of beside a pond with some wetlands grasses all around it. Okay, now I'm ready to add color. All right, so I'm happy with how my drawing is. I'm gonna take my 2 Sharpies. I have a fine tip and a regular Sharpie. I'm gonna alternate between the 2 so that I can get a little bit of variety in my line. And I'm gonna just start by laying down large areas of color. So I'm gonna do a time lapse right here. So I'm just going and adding sort of coloring to get color laid down onto both the Pokemon and the background later on. So after I get these large areas of color added, then we'll talk about how I can layer and add texture. Okay, so I'm going to use a darker pencil crayon. I'm kind of doing some shading. So I'm pretending that the light is coming, there's like a sun shining down on the Pokemon from the top right-hand side of the paper. Okay, and then I'm gonna use a darker brown. I've used kind of like a light reddish brown to color the Pokemon's fur. And now I'm going to do some shading. So we do sometimes see shading, even though we're doing a cartoony style. Some cartoons do have some shading and we do see that in Pokemon. So I'm gonna do sort of a little darker area on the bottom side of the Pokemon's body. And then I'm trying to add a lighter highlight using a white pencil crayon. You can't see it as well as I could in real life on the camera, but it does kind of help it look a little bit lighter over there. So I'm pretending like the sun is shining on that side. And then often there is like a tiny little shadow on round objects, and this animal's body is round, so I did a little shadow over on that side too. So what I want is, like I said, I'm not expecting it to be real, like full realism, because these are pretend animals, but we can use our knowledge of shading and light and shadow to make it look a little bit more rooted in real life. Okay, so now I'm using green pencil crayon and I'm doing a shadow on the froggy legs. And froggy legs would be kind of like shiny and smooth, right? Whereas the beaver fur would be furry and fuzzy and textured, right? So I want to make sure that they do look different, that there is a distinction between the two, okay? So we're gonna think about, how can I add shading? How can I add texture to my drawing? I'm using that yellow pencil crayon to create the highlight. So I can use white, but with certain colors too, it's nice to use a brighter color or a darker color instead of white or black. So there's the froggy legs. I'm going to do a similar technique with the beak. So I am layering my pencil crayons. I want them to be really bright and visible from far away. So I had the orange beak and I'm layering it with yellow. And then I'm actually going to use a red pencil crayon to create the shadow on the beak. So I'm going to kind of have a shadow at the top part there and just a little one at the bottom. So I should see lots of layering, lots of texture in your drawings too. Okay, now I'm ready to outline. You can color your background before you outline, it's up to you. And remember what I said, I'm doing both thin fine tip and regular tip Sharpies. So I'm just trying to make there be a variety of different thicknesses of lines, right? Because again, we do see that in cartoons, even though they are more abstract than realistic. So in the areas where it would be kind of in the shadow, I'm doing the thicker Sharpie, and then I'm just gonna leave certain parts of the outline to do with my fine tip Sharpie. And I find that doing outlines with Sharpie is really tricky. You have to have like such a steady hand, and so don't worry if your outline is a little bit wiggly. What I like to do if I get a wiggly outline is I just kind of go over that line a second time. So I just make it a little bit thicker, and that kind of helps me. And you know, the only way to get better at it is just to practice. So if your outlines are a little bit wiggly, it's just showing that you're practicing. It's all good. So I've added some texture on the tail and on the fur with my thick Sharpie. And now I'm going to use my fine tip Sharpie, like I said, in those areas where it would be not a shadow. And I'm just going to complete the outline. So I am going to have an outline all the way around because cartoons often do. And so yeah, I'm going to continue on with doing that outline. Okay, so remember, you also need to address your background, do something with your background. So I'm just gonna do kind of like a light pencil crayon shading for the sky, and like I said, I'm doing a wetland animal that's an amphibian, so it lives in both the water and on the land. So I want to show that and make that really clear in my picture, because my picture is not only just for fun to look at, it's also sort of teaching about wetlands as well. And then I have used a ruler and a Sharpie marker to explain my animal's adaptations. I want to make sure it's easy to read. And if you choose, you could use Google Slides to add the text in instead, like this. So don't forget to label and give your Pokemon a name. I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thanks for watching.